Hi everybody, it's Tatiana, and I wanted to come to do a somewhat quick discussion video. This is my second attempt at recording this video because the first one just felt very rambling and I didn't like it. So I wanted to do this more as a discussion video, and so I'm going to do like a little discussion series. We're going to call it Talk to Tati, and I had been thinking about doing this kind of series for a while, and I just hadn't because there wasn't something that I either read or heard about or thought about that seemed really pressing to me to do it. However, I recently read Native Son by Richard Wright, and this was more pressing. And so because of reading this, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and make this the inaugural video of this series. This is not something that's going to be uploaded on any kind of schedule as they happen or as thoughts happen that I want to discuss. I will do a video about it, and you'll see it in your newsfeed if you are subscribed. I read Native Son because I did not get the opportunity to read it in high school, and I was a little jealous when I was in high school of seeing my friends read this novel and me not being able to read it just because I was in a different kind of English course. And I read Black Boy first, and then I went ahead and picked this up. And those are the two books that I really saw circulating around when I was in high school that were assigned reading for my friends. And Black Boy I did a review of, and I will put the link to that in the description box below if you're interested in checking that out. Native Son I will not be doing a review of because I really don't know how to review it, hence the discussion video. I will say this, when I have discussion videos about books, please be aware that they will be rife with spoilers. So if you have not read this, you don't want to be spoiled about what happens in the story, then stop watching now. The story follows Bigger Thomas. It starts out with him waking up in the morning to his mother screaming and killing a rat. Bigger Thomas is a 20-year-old young adult, and he is responsible for getting work so that his family, mother, his sister, and brother can get support from the relief agency in 1930s Chicago and basically maintain themselves. Without Bigger working, the relief is cut off. And so Bigger has an interview with the Dalton family, and he is to go see them later on that day in the hopes that he will be hired and that their relief work can continue. When the book begins, you really see that Bigger is not that likable of a character. If you're watching this and you've read it, you know that. He is kind of shiftless, and he's irresponsible, and he really just doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He discusses the possibility of robbing a store that is owned and operated by a white man with his friends, and they're all pretty scared to do it because while they've robbed people in the past, they've all been black people, and it's different for blacks to rob blacks versus blacks robbing whites, and the consequences are different because there are consequences. As you go about Bigger's day, things fall apart, the robbery doesn't happen, and Bigger goes on to his interview with the Daltons, is hired, and on his first day murders their only daughter by accident. And in an attempt to hide or cover up the murder, the truly accidental murder, in an attempt to hide and cover it up, he does some gruesome shit and eventually gets caught, and a manhunt ensues to capture him and send him to jail so that he can be put on trial, with the realization that his trial will result in the death penalty because this is a black man who's killed a white woman in 1930s U.S. I kind of have questions that I want just to see what the answers would be My main question is, how was this discussed? If you read this in high school, how was this discussed in the high school classroom? There are so many things that occur in this story that could be taken and picked apart. Not just dealing with life in 1930 Chicago, but how some of the issues that take place in this book would have still been evident and prevalent and possible, very possible, in the 90s when I was in high school, in the 80s when some of my other friends read this, in the 2000s. I don't even know if this is still on the high school curriculum for English. I haven't seen, I mean, it's got to be. This is from the library, and this is in horrible condition. And I had to wait to get it. I had to put it on hold. So it has to be still on the high school curriculum because Black Boy and Native Son are in high demand at the library. And so yeah, how is this discussed, or was this discussed in the high school classroom? What things were pulled out of the novel and discussed at length? And how did this go over in my high school? The population was predominantly Black, but we had a large white student body as well, and so the classes that read this were interracial classes. And so how is this discussed in the interracial classroom? I missed out on an opportunity to have this kind of discussion in class. So that is my major question. The other things are just some observations that I had, and if you have anything to add to them, please do so in the comments below. Help me out on this, because I kind of sort of don't really know what to take away from this novel now that I've finished it. As I said, the novel begins with Bigger killing a rat for his mother and sister in the bedroom, in their one-bedroom flat or studio apartment. And as I got to his capture later on in the book, I couldn't help but think about the fact that his capture and murder of the rat kind of paralleled his capture when he is chased down by the angry citizens in the city of Chicago. The other thing that kind of stuck out to me is when he's on the run, he knows he's going to be caught. He totally gives up the prime opportunity that he has to run away, get away, and stays in the city before anyone is ever looking for him, before he's ever suspected of murder. And he gives that up. And so he knows he's going to be caught. The entire city of Chicago, for the most part, Black and white citizens, are looking for him. Yet he continues to run until he is literally boxed into one small section of the city and is waterboarded out almost in the still freezing end of the winter season in Chicago. And if you have ever been to Chicago in the winter, I have not, but I do have friends who have lived in Chicago briefly and have visited Chicago during the winter season. It's pretty damn cold, and it's a pretty long winter. And there is snow on the ground when he is running. So there are so many variables that are against him in his flight, yet he still runs knowing that he's going to be captured. He gets to the point where he doesn't care whether or not he dies. He doesn't care what happens. On top of killing one white girl, he kills his Black girlfriend, where everybody knows that they're connected. And there's so much of him that doesn't care until he is put in the position by his lawyer to think about his life and think about what he may have wanted to do. And then he realizes that there's more that he wants to do than die. There was more that he wanted to do with his life than what he ended up doing with it. And then the question is, did he have the opportunity? And a lot of times, even in today's society, we still have youth who are not, who don't seem to be given the opportunity to do more, or don't think that they can do more with themselves and with their lives than what they see around them as being available to them. Again, how was that discussed in the high school classroom is my big question. Some of, the high school experience when I was in school was interracial. There were black and white kids who read this. And the fact that this is a black and white story on both the good things and the bad things. What's wrong is wrong. No matter how you try to twist it, what's wrong is wrong. And then it's a crime that's committed against a white girl by a black man in 1930s Chicago, where there is one alternative when you are caught, and that is death. Then probably the final thing I'm going to talk about, since I already asked the major question that I wanted to ask at the start of the video, is Bigger only really went between two emotions, and that was anger and fear. And everything that he really did was a result of that anger and that fear. Either he was brought into a new situation and he was scared of what to do and didn't want to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, and then he would slip to being pissed about being put in that situation and the possibility that he could say the wrong thing, and it is whoever's fault for putting him in that situation and being angry towards that person for making him have to evaluate and think about and possibly, talk about something that he wasn't interested in talking about or didn't know about, being put in a situation that he was uncomfortable in, like when Mary and Jan asked him to take them out to eat, and that's totally foreign to him, and then take him out to eat on the black side of town. So take him out to eat where they aren't known, but he is known. And those two sides of his emotions guided 90% of what took place in the story until he killed Mary and thinks that he can get away with it. And he's like excited. And I was almost said turned on, and that's not the term that I wanted to use, but he is excited about the fact that he has gotten away with it, and I could do this shit again, and nobody would be any wiser because they don't expect this of me. Also, his lawyer's closing arguments, like his lawyer presented no case, but his ridiculously long, in my opinion, closing argument is in the story in its entirety. Is written into the story, and I have to say, if I were assigned this in high school, I either would have stopped probably 2 pages in to his closing argument, or just skipped ahead to the rest of the story, because a big part of me felt like, how nice that you're attempting to do this and spare Bigger's life, but we all know he's going to be executed. We all know that's going to happen because this is 1930s Chicago, or 1930s America, period. And so, if you read this in high school, did you read the entire closing argument by his defense attorney? I did read it, but if I were in high school and reading it, I probably would have stopped. And in everything that I have shared, if there's anything additional that you would like to add that was discussed when you talked about this in high school, any points that were made or expounded upon, please put them in the comments below. I am truly, truly intrigued to know how this was handled in the high school classroom. The final thing that I will talk about is in the last section of the book. Richard Wright has a section about how Bigger was born and how he had come across many characters or people, real life people, who were like the character Bigger Thomas, and that Bigger Thomas grew out of that character, as well as a case that took place in, is it Chicago? Was it Chicago? During the time period that he was writing this story. And for this to have been discussed in the high school classroom, I know I went to high school with quite a few Biggers. I went to elementary and middle school with quite a few Biggers. And how if those types of people read this story, what effect did it have on those types of people? Did they participate in the discussion? If there was discussion, I found that very interesting and very true to the character of people, because even today there are real life Bigger Thomases, and you can see them just as he saw them, and I'm sure many of us have seen them when we were in elementary school, middle school, and high school. The same is today, and not necessarily their lives have to end up the exact same way that Bigger Thomases did, or even the way that some of the examples that Richard Wright shared in that essay following the story. But if you remember, how was that part of it discussed in class, where you have the potential of having Bigger Thomases in the classroom with you, knowing Bigger Thomases, living in a neighborhood with Bigger Thomases, and how did reading this novel affect, I guess, how you related to them? I would, like to know that as well, because this would have had a major effect on me if I read this when I was in high school, outside of traumatizing me just a little bit, because I had serious anxiety about death and how people dealt with death when they knew they were going to die. This would have given me a little bit of a panic attack had I read it when I was in high school, and I still would have read it and enjoyed the read of it and the experience of it, but I would have had some anxiety. And I find it interesting that this is still on the curriculum for high school reading, considering the kinds of books that are getting banned for schools, high school, elementary, and middle school these days. So yeah, if you have any thoughts, anything to add, any comments about this book, please put them in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you all, because like I said about 50 times already, and in other videos, I didn't get the chance to discuss this when I was in high school. So be my classmates and talk to me. And I hope you all have a good weekend whenever you see this video. Peace out.